Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time as a listener, thank you for joining us. If you're a reoccurring listener, thank you for joining us once again. If the subject and the contents of coaching, leadership, and team is something that you're passionate about, it resonates with you, think this channel is a great fit, think this podcast is a great fit, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Have a great day. How's it going? This is Keanu Yamamoto with the Coachers Podcast. I'm here with Coach Steve Valach, head football coach for Liberty High School in Issaquah, Washington. Coach, thanks for jumping on. Please tell us about your family, journey, background, all that good stuff.
All right. Well, it's good to be here bright and early. Thanks for asking me to do this. So I'm from your part of the state. I'm originally from Salem, Oregon. I grew up in Salem, went to South Salem High School, and then ended up going up to Washington and went to Pacific Lutheran University, where I played football for Frosty Westering, and then got a job teaching at age 22. And I just retired in June from my teaching position after 38 years, and will continue to coach and be the head coach at Liberty. I'm married to Natasha. My wife will celebrate 28 years of marriage this summer. And then we have two adult boys. Isaiah is 23 and Elijah is 19.
That's awesome, Coach. Kind of just tell us about, I guess, your journey. You said you've been there for 38 years. Was there ever a time in your career where you're like, man, maybe I want to try something different, or I want to go to X school, or maybe try the college game? Can you kind of talk about that and just be able to, sustain at one place and be successful at one place for so long?
Yeah, to answer your question, yes. Many times I have thought, shoot, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Yeah, and it has been a journey. So it's 38. I'm going in. This will be your 39 coaching, and it'll be my 28th at Liberty. So, almost three full decades. And there's been a bunch of times. My first 5 years, I think we won 11 games total. And when one of those was a winless season. And when you go through all of that, it definitely, you do some soul searching. But I think it was really a blessing to not have a lot of success at the beginning. I think that could have been just the kiss of death to, maybe get complacent. And I think it really put me on this journey of figuring out, why am I doing this? What is my purpose? Certainly my goal is to win, but what's my purpose? And so, yeah, many, many times during that. Number one, I have a great wife, and she always encouraged me. There were a lot of moments of self-doubt, especially when you're not winning. And then you throw in having kids and you deal with that tension of, shoot, I'm spending more time with other people's kids than my own. And then I would say, Keanu, I kind of have arrived at this idea, like we have battleship moments during our lives, during our careers. And a battleship moment. So several years ago, I had a good friend. He was with FCA. He's a guy from Tennessee. And I was kind of lamenting, we'd had a lot of success. We played for a state title in 2009. And sometimes with success comes, there are problems that come with success, just like there are with losing. But anyway, it'd been in 2010, I think we were ranked number one, won a big game at the beginning of the year against Skyline High School. It was like 1 and 2, 4A and 3A. And man, you would think I was on top of the world. I was not. It was so hard. I had internal struggles with my coaching staff. And towards the end of that year, I was talking to this FCA guy, Scott Cooper. He's now on the Carolina Panthers coaching staff with Dave Canales, the head coach. But anyway, I was complaining, talking about how rough it was, and instead of spending my summers with other people's kids, I want to spend it with my kids. And anyway, he goes, Coach, you ain't a cruise ship, you're a battleship. And I've used that analogy ever since then. A cruise ship is meant for one thing: pleasure, easy street, path of least resistance. If a cruise ship is thrown into battle, how are you going to protect yourself? How are you going to go on the offensive? A battleship, on the other hand, is built for it. And you can still have a dance party, you can still play volleyball and sunbathe on the deck. But when it's time to fight, if you're a battleship, you're ready to go. And so I've loved that analogy. And then when I think back at my career, I think there are these battleship moments where I was really tested. And it was, it's not easy. Are you going to step away and hang up the whistle because it's just too hard for you? Or is this a moment and an opportunity for you to really grow and evolve and develop your why for coaching? And what I found is that during those battleship moments, they've been very challenging, but they've also been my greatest moments of growth. One was in 2008. One was 2010, one was in 2012, and then one was in 2021. Those would
Yeah.
be some of my battleship moments.
That's awesome, Coach. Can you kind of talk about, you led the discussion on last Friday for the FCA coaches meeting. Can you kind of talk about just that testimony of you guys, that experience with Bellevue and how you went about addressing the team and, leading up to that game?
Yeah. So I'm sure folks, if you've been around high school football for a while, you know about Bellevue High School. Well, they're in our league. So every year for going on 28 years, we're going to play Bellevue. And we had, we'd been competitive with them in the mid to late 2000s, just some tough games, but they'd always get us. They got us in the state championship. And then there's other times where we weren't very competitive with them at all. Well, 2012 rolls around and we have our lowest turnout that we've had since I've been at Liberty. And we roll into the Bellevue week with 23 eligible, healthy players. And they're the number one ranked high school team in the country. And it's probably week 7, week 8. And that season had been just a real test for me. I thought during the 2012 season, with all the things that were happening, about week 3, I like to journal. So I'd written my resignation letter in my journal. I'm like, I'm done. This is it. I shared with my wife, and she always tries to talk me out of it. This time she's like, well, if you really think so. So that was probably week 3. And as the season progresses, it's not like some Disney movie where we turn it around and play for the championship. I mean, we struggle. We have 3 quarterbacks. They're all hurt. And so we're going into the Bellevue game, and our wide receiver is going to play quarterback. So we're going to be in shotgun. And we roll into that Monday meeting, and I'm thinking, my kids are scared. They should be, right? It's who knows what's going to happen here. So we roll into Monday and we have our team meeting, and I didn't give some rah-rah speech like we're going to get this done. My talk was, we going into this week, I'm not going to lie to you. There's no chance we're going to win, but we can be successful. And so then I went through an exercise where I had them close their eyes, gave me an index card and something to write with. And I said, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine being at Bellevue's field. You're walking off the field at the end of the game. You look at the scoreboard. It is not in our favor. It's lopsided against us. But as you look around at your teammates, you look up in the stands, I want you to think about 2 things. Number 1, what do I want to say is true about me as a player after that game? And what I want to say is true about us as a team. And so gave him some time, and guys wrote stuff. And we had a little running back, Russell Boston. He was a sophomore. He's like 5'6", 140. He's like, Coach, I want to feel like I got jumped after that game. I'm thinking, that's going to happen. You're going to experience that. But the things that came out were guys were, talking about, I want to say we fought to the end. I want to say that, we locked arms and we stayed together no matter what. And, we went out there, we drove down, like we hit a big sweep, and we get down, we were like first and goal on the 7-yard line. And I think we lost in 3 plays, lost like 7 yards. Then we kicked a field goal. So I think we were actually up 3-0 in that game, right? And, and you're just thinking, maybe, just maybe, if the stars align. Well, final score was 49-11, not in our favor. But what came out of that experience, where we had no chance to win, is that I rediscovered my why and my passion for coaching. Because I've had way more 3 and 7 years in my life than I have, 12-1 playing for the state title. So that was a defining moment for me. That was one of those battleship moments that led to, my evolution as a coach.
Yeah. Kind of just to piggyback off of that, you mentioned your why. Can you kind of dive into, why do you coach? Why do you love it? Year 39, why do you keep doing it?
Yeah. One of the things I was really blessed to have great coaches. I had a great Little League coach named Bud Schulte at Leslie Little League in Salem, Oregon. And he just believed in me, and he taught lessons really well. And I had a freshman baseball coach at South Salem named Pete Hoffert. And again, a guy who some guys who think they're the C team or the Little League coach or the whatever, that you don't have an impact. I remember those guys I'm 60 years old, and they had profound impact on who I want to be as a coach. And then Dave Johnson was my head coach at South Salem. And then I played for Frosty Westering. So I had a lot of coaches that I think what the gifts that they gave me was that they made me see that the sport, whatever it is, baseball, football, that is bigger than that. And so for me, I've always thought about that, other side of it, not just the execution of a scheme and a game plan, but who my players are becoming. And so out of the 2012 experience, I was really on pace, like, forget about the resignation letter. Like I knew I wanted to keep coaching. And so I did a ton of work on mission, vision, purpose. I mean, that was my jam that whole off season, the end of that season. And so, I started working on a mission statement, and I had somebody who helped guide me through it. And I read a book called The Path by this woman named Lori Beth Jones. And I always thought, man, as a football coach, you're going to lose your job. Does that sound kind of soft? Lori Beth Jones, The Path. And she is just a great book. But the way she described a mission statement, if you're going to have a mission, it's going to be one sentence. It's going to be easy enough that a 12-year-old can understand it. And you need to be able to recite it at gunpoint. And her point was, a lot of people go through mission statements, mission writing, all that stuff, but it's just an exercise that ends up in a manila folder in a desk drawer somewhere, and you don't know it. And so from that, I started working on mine. And so my mission statement as a football coach is to unlock greatness in the boys we coach and launch them into becoming men of action who lead with empathy, integrity, and joy. And so I looked at really like the key words were like, what are the actions that are going to happen? I want to unlock greatness. I want to launch, like when you finish with us, that wasn't the climax of your life, like the greatest years of my life. No, I want to launch them into adulthood where you're men who make an impact wherever you are, and that they would lead with action, and so that was the mission. And then I did a vision statement with it as well that I'd be happy to share with you. But the vision statement, so in January, after I'd been working on my mission statement, I was sitting in church, and it was the Sunday before MLK Day. And the pastor was talking about MLK and sharing the I Have a Dream speech and all of that. And as he was talking about it, I was really struck by, I Have a Dream is a vision statement. It's this bold, audacious, daring vision statement for our country. And it really made me start thinking about what's my vision statement, what's my dream for my football program. And so I started crafting I Have a Dream for Liberty football.
That's cool, Coach. Kind of just diving into that. If you had to put like an hour count on that, like how long did it take you to, I guess, think, reflect, dissect who you are, what you stood for, put it on paper, erase it, put it on paper, erase it, and be like, okay, this is the finished product. This is who I am.
A lot. Yeah. Days
and
days.
And when did you know, like, okay, this is right? Like, when did you know? Like, what was that click for you?
That's a great question. So I'm a journaler, so this is my journal that I probably have, 45 of these. So I write every morning, and, it really was just letting it go. Like, what's the dream? And then it kind of gained momentum. And the cool thing is that, that's what fueled me to keep going. It wasn't wins. It was getting clarity around my why, my purpose, my vision as a coach. And it's really what sustained me throughout. They say a mission statement is an anchor and a sword. It's an anchor that keeps you, you don't drift too much. You see, it's like, hey, this is my mission. And so you don't drift. And then it's also a sword because it helps you cut away those things that, are just distractions from your true mission.
Yeah, sorry, Coach. We got caught up there. You were talking about, using your mission statement as an anchor. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah. So a mission statement serves as an anchor and a sword. It's an anchor in a sense that it keeps you stabilized so you don't drift too much. And then it's a sword also because if you have a good, clear mission statement, it keeps you focused on what you want to be about. So all the extraneous, unnecessary stuff that can come at you, you can cut that away. I also wanted to share, so I was in the midst of this, really jamming on this idea of mission statement, and went down to Portland for a football clinic, the Nike Coach of the Year clinic down there. And this would have been, early Pete Carroll years. And Pete was the keynote for the Friday night meeting. So everything's shut down and all the coaches gather in this giant ballroom and listen to Coach Carroll. And he gets up there and he's talking mission. And I'm like, man, mission, that's exactly where I've been lately. And he starts saying, and he says, how many of you have a mission statement in your football program? And, every coach in there raises his hand. He says, how many of you can recite it word for word for me right now? And it's like 3 guys. And he said, the rest of you do not have one, right? If that thing is not integrated into your soul and you can recite it, you really don't have one. It's just an exercise you did. And that has always stuck with me. And so I think it's important when having the mission there is the thing that helps you navigate all the nonsense and the emotions and the ups and downs. And I think, if you want to ask about like longevity and staying power for me, that's been it. I know my why.
That's good stuff, Coach. Can you kind of touch on, just your experience playing for Frosty Westering and, who he is as a person and just kind of his impact, not only for, PLU football, but just kind of Pacific Northwest and football and, sports psychology in general?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're a Linfield guy, so I appreciate that you're coming to the right side. Yeah. So my experience, I had to walk on at PLU in the fall of '83, and I didn't know. I'd met with my dad during the summer. I said, Dad, I knew I was going to PLU. I didn't know if I wanted to keep playing football. And my dad didn't push sports. And I said, Dad, I don't know. I think I just want to kind of go to school, and if I want to keep playing football. And he said, you can do whatever you want to do. I'm good with that, whatever your choice is, but I don't want you to be my age and be saying, I wish I would have, because there's too many guys walking around doing that. And he said, if you can walk away with you don't think you'll feel that way, then walk away. But if you can't, you need to give this thing a shot. And so I wrestled with that. It was a great dad, pearl of wisdom. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to walk on. So I called the athletic director office and talked to secretary. And I said, hey, I want to walk on, and how do I do this? And she goes, well, let me give you Frosty's number. I'm like, who is Frosty? And so she gives me his home phone number. And I'm thinking, I'm going to call the head coach of Pacific Lutheran University at his home to ask about. And so I still remember this, nervous as can be, probably the most nervous I'd ever been for a phone call. And I call and his wife, Donna, answers. And, I said, hi, my name's Steve. I want to walk on. Hold on, I'll get Frosty. And he's on, and, we're going to meet Olson Auditorium, in front of, and so that was my first introduction. Like, I'm calling the coach at his house, and I'm calling him by his first name. So anyway, I was a walk-on right away. It just felt different. As a walk-on, I didn't travel, but I suited up for home games, and we used to play at the Lincoln Bowl in Tacoma. And I remember it was a game against Linfield, and back and forth, classic battle of, PLU Linfield 80s football. And we drive down at the very end of the game. It's 28. We score 28-27 with, 30 seconds left. And we go for 2. And it's a play action pass. Linebacker blitzes. Our quarterback gets blown up, and we lose it 28-27. Now I'm thinking, I'm this freshman walk-on who hasn't played it down. My focus is like, what am I going to have post game for food? And then we go meet in this like big mat storage room, and we go in there, and guys are kind of crying, and I'm still thinking about food. And Frosty comes in and he goes, guys, that's on me. The buck stops here. That's a loss. It's on your coach. And the quarterback, a guy named Kevin Scogan, stands up and he goes, I can't accept that, coach. If one of us lost, we all do. And I'm sitting there going, what is going on here? And guys are crying. But that was kind of my first moment of going, this is different. This is different. And so, and that kept me going. I had to walk on my next year too, because I got hurt that freshman year, separated my shoulder, and had to walk on again. And so many cool things. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of something, quote something that I learned from Frosty. And I think that's true for almost all the guys that played for him. So it really was an amazing experience. And it's one of those things you don't realize how special your opportunities or experiences are until you get away and you meet other people. All you know is what you know. Yeah. But what I've learned in the 40 years since I played for him is that I got to experience something really special.
Yeah. Kind of just piggybacking off of that, when I got to Linfield, Ad Rushman was the kickoff return coach. And, at that point, you know the name, but you don't know the significance and the weight of it. And just like you said, you don't know until you're kind of removed from the situation. And I got my dog over here just trying to lick me, but I had the opportunity. I got on with Coach Rutch, I think maybe 2 months ago. And, we were on there for about an hour, and he's 94, but his recall and, talk about your mission statement just being ingrained in you. It was just really cool to see him, talk about coaching and, be able to communicate that and make it very digestible, 40 years after the fact. And I just thought that that relationship was really awesome. Like, Ad Rushman doesn't exist without Frosty Westering. Frosty Westering, doesn't exist without Ad Rushman. And I say that in the sense that like that rivalry and that competitiveness and that, it fueled each other and made both programs really successful. And I think it's a really cool dichotomy because, yeah, both coaches are greatly successful. And I'm sure there was a lot of bad blood back in those days, but just the utmost respect for each other and the programs.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, it was, I think, competition at its best.
Yeah.
And so many just, if somebody was going to play for the national title out of those two teams for many years there.
What would you say is the greatest challenge within coaching?
It's a good question. I think I would say I would go back to probably to not let your self-worth be determined by winning or losing a football game. And I think you've heard this phrase, and I'm sure guys have been on here, like being a transformational coach rather than transactional. And I think, transactional is where you use the players to meet your goals. Transformational coaches, we use our position to enable players to fully become themselves. And I think probably the greatest challenge as a coach, it has to go back to not letting yourself be defined, your self-worth, all of that by your success or failure on the field.
Yeah.
Scoreboard wise.
How do you go about, kind of detaching yourself from the result of that?
It's always living in the tension of it. We just got done. We played a big scrimmage on Saturday. We were at Tumwater High School and, had 3 scrimmages, and first 2 went pretty well. And the last one we played Emerald Ridge and just, they took it to us. So I think it's always under tension. And I think the good coaches, they live within that tension, right? I heard a guy say, Joe Ehrman, you may have heard of Joe Ehrman. He wrote a book. He was a subject of a book called Season of Life. And then he wrote a book called Inside Out Coaching. And he's just an incredible speaker and writer. But, I stole his phrase. He said, winning is my goal, but it's not my purpose. And I think the good coaches, I want to win, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not your purpose, right? Winning is the goal. The purpose is, for me, it's unlocking greatness in the boys that coach and launch them into being men of action and lead with empathy, integrity, and joy. So I think that would be my answer to that.
Yeah. You think in 5-10 years from now, do you think that mission statement's going to be the exact same, or you think it's going to adjust as you kind of progress through your life?
Here's the one problem is that I have a little freshman football female linebacker and fullback. And so it's got to be to unlock greatness in the individual as I coach, because it really isn't, it's not gender specific, but it's person specific, right? Unlock greatness in you and launch you, have qualities of empathy, integrity. And I think, and joy is so big. The joy component of it after COVID, COVID was, my oldest son was a senior for the COVID season. And up here in Washington, we got 4 games, so he never got a homecoming. He never got a senior night. He never got a playoff opportunity. And he was a senior who never really played till he was a senior. He just wasn't there yet. And if you remember those times, like everything was about protocols, social distancing, temperature checks. It was just like, how do we get on the field? So that was 2020. And we played up here in February. We played 4 games. And then that following season, 2021, it was still about temp checks, social distancing, all of that. And what I realized during that time is we were so focused on just being able to play and get on the field that we did zero team building. We did zero kind of, how do you, connect and play with one heartbeat and all that stuff. And what happened was that there was no joy. There was no connectedness. And so one of the evolutions from COVID was, I added joy to my mission statement. Like, I think it's got to be part of it. It's got to be part of why we play a game is the joy of it.
That's good stuff, Coach. Speaking on that, from a team building standpoint, from a culture standpoint, what are you guys doing, off the field, aside from the weight room, to help instill, your coaching philosophy, the team's culture, and so on and so forth?
Well, that's always been a huge part of it for me. One of the things we do, end of every practice, we do hey, what was good today? And that'd be an opportunity for Keanu you give a shout out to that scout team corner who was giving you a great look all day. Don't recognize that guy. So we do that. We end every practice with what was good. Through the years, we've also ended practices with, I know it's kind of been made famous now, but we do a hero hardship highlight. That was a thing that Dabo Sweeney did at Clemson. Kid will talk about a hero in his life, a hardship he's experienced, and a highlight. We've also done, at the end of a practice, we'll do spotlight on a champion. And we say, okay, up today, we got Keanu, and I'll bring him up and I'll say, okay, what do you guys see in Keanu's life? It may have something to do with football, but let's think about bigger than football. And so kids will say, hey, he's a great friend, man. He's always there, when I've needed someone to listen to me and give good advice. What else do you see in his life? And then I ask the coaches, what do you see in Keanu's life? And then when we get done, I'll say, all right, man, okay, you just heard, 65 guys and 10 coaches tell you the truth about who you are and what's true about you in your life. Do you think they're lying to you? No, coach. I said, all right. So when life's kicking your butt and you start to doubt, right, you remember what you were told today. That's the truth of who you are. So that's one thing we'll do.
I like that. How do the selection process for that? Are you just see someone kind of going through the grinder a little bit or what does that look like?
So I'll prep kids, say, okay, hey, maybe Monday it's you. And then I'll say, okay, Keanu, who's up tomorrow? Who's our spotlight guy tomorrow? Say, okay, it's going to be Spencer. And so Spencer knows, if we're doing hero hardship highlight, you want the kids to have a little bit processing time to think about it, not just put them on the spot. Or if it's a spotlight on a champion, we'll know, hey, tomorrow it's going to be, George. And so people will know, okay, man, it's George tomorrow. Let me think about some stuff I value and appreciate about him. So that's one of the things. I read a book back in 2008 called Facing Your Giants. And it's a book by Max Lucado. And it's the story of David and Goliath. And he uses it as a metaphor. And he says, David had 5 smooth stones because Goliath had brothers. And so we needed 5. But the book's really about, that we all face giants in our lives, and those giants could be fear of failure, addiction to being, affirmation, like I need to be told I'm a good guy or whatever. And so one of the things we'll do before we go to like team camp or start our 2-a-days is my assignment is, okay, each of us faces giants in our lives. What I want you to bring practice tomorrow when we meet between practice sessions, I want you to bring 5 smooth stones. And on each stone, I want you to write like a character trait. And I'll say, pick 3 character traits that that are strengths of yours. And then I want you to pick 2 that you want to work on. And if you're not sure, talk to people who know you best. Because sometimes kids aren't, they're very self-critical, but they can tell you everything that's wrong with them, but they can't tell you their strengths. And then we'll meet in groups and, have guys say, take out your 5 smooth stones and, in your group, talk about what those stones are, why you selected them. And so that's one of the things we'll do. Picking out your 5 smooth stones that are going to help you slay the giants in your life. Another thing that we'll do, and these are all things that I've, stolen or modified or whatever from somebody else. But another thing that we'll do is do family photos. So, you're in your small group, but bring pictures of your family and, tell us, who are you most like in your family, and so kids get to know each other and, kind of pull the curtain back on their life a little bit. And then, another thing that we did years ago was we'd work on writing a team creed. And so we did it for like several years. We did it. And then kind of we landed on this kid in 2004. He wrote a creed that was like, I don't think anybody can top that. Why don't we just keep that as our creed? And so that has been our creed for 22 years now. So every pregame, the last thing the kids do before they go out is, okay, it's time for the creed. It's one heart, one beat, one sound. We are the ones who compete on this hollow ground. We strive for victory every game. To attain greatness is our aim. We're only as strong as our weakest link. We must come together or else all will sink. Our hearts not rest, our goals are achieved together more than anyone perceived. No matter the situation, we will never surrender. And 20 years from now, we will be the ones to remember. This is a place where champions are found. One heart, one beat, one sound, and then there.
That is good, man.
So kid
Was he a
wrote that.
senior? Was he a
He was a
young guy?
senior. He went
Yeah.
on, he became a Marine. He's a lawyer in the Marines now. But, so that's one of the things you got to learn as a freshman. Like, okay, it's when you test. Have you memorized the creed? Have you memorized the creed? And so that's been a cool part of what we do.
Yeah.
And then one of our other traditions that has really been powerful, and we just did it, is that, when we go to team camp, and we haven't gone to team camp the last 2 years, we've kind of done it at Liberty, but it has to do with those 5 smooth stones. The 5 smooth stones, when I was going through that phase, I had talked to a buddy and I said, I got this idea about getting 5 smooth stones, kids face their giants. And he's like, okay. And he's one of those friends who always like, I have an idea. And then he like blows it up. It's like blows it up in a good way, like, expands the vision. And I was telling him about these 5 smooth stones. And I just think, do you think that's a good idea? And he goes, yeah. He goes, you know what you ought to do too? You have like 5 boulders delivered to your field and they could line the field and those 5 boulders can represent it. I'm like, he's telling me this and I'm like, yeah, whatever. So then later that day, I call one of my assistant coaches and I said, yeah, my friend was talking about, like we should have 5 boulders delivered. And he goes, well, the people who own that rock quarry up in Preston, they're Liberty grads. You should give them a call. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I called this rock quarry and I said, I'm just going to ask this. I don't know how much it would cost. They're like, we'd love to help you out, coach. I tell you what, we'll deliver 5 big boulders, no cost. And so they delivered 5 big boulders. We set them out. It wasn't around our field, but it was around the entrance to our locker room. You got these 5 big rocks. I don't even think I asked for permission from the administration, but, and then the guy, they also said, hey, we dropped off the rocks. And then we also put one at the base of your field. It's got this flat face on it. And you could like sandblast stuff into it if you wanted to. And so that was 2008. And so since 2008, every year, our seniors pick the one word they want to have describe them as a team. And we get it sandblasted, like they do with like 2 gravestones. And so 2008, the word was tenacity, and that was the first word. We've done that ever since. This year's word they picked was dominate. And what we do is those seniors, whatever the word's going to be, they've got to present it to the team and to the coaches, for us, it was during spring ball this year. And we grill them. Yeah. So they stand up front, they read it. It's like, delivering I don't know, I didn't ever get a PhD, but I would imagine like delivering your thesis in front of a bunch of professors. And we grill them, we're like, you're not living that out right now. Talk is cheap. What are you going to, So we really try to emphasize that if you're going to say it and we're going to sandblast it on a rock, it's going to be there long after I'm gone, right? So you need to live that out. How are you going to, what's the application of that word going to look like on a daily? And so it really helps them define themselves. And their word this year was dominate. And my feedback was, because dominate is to have control over a person or whatever. And I'm like, the first person you got to dominate is yourself, right? That's where it all starts. So this isn't some external thing. It's an internal focused on me. And so that's been super powerful because we call them out. People who dominate the day are not walking in late to class. And some of you are, it's a habit. You're late to everything, right? You're sitting in the back, you got late work, you're not working hard, you're making excuses. People who dominate the day do not do that.
Yeah.
And so it's really this opportunity to call them up, which is what you want. That's the, like, if you could say, man, this is sport at its best makes you a better person, not a person who gets privileges and is exempt from following the rules and doesn't have to do that because I'm elite. No, that's not the way it works. And so that's been a super powerful thing for us.
I really like the 5 stones one. I think that's really good.
Yeah. Another cool thing that we've done, and I stole this, from, I think, Bellevue. Somebody like back in 2003, one of our coaches knew somebody who was coaching or son that played at Bellevue. And the idea was that they would, I think they did during their summer camp, they would have family, friends, aunts, uncles, parents write letters to their kids and tell them, what they think about them. And so we have started doing that. Well, it's been 23 years now, but we started doing that before senior night. So senior night, the first time I did it, my seniors had no idea it was coming. But I reached out really quietly to all the, the families and said, hey, we're going to write letters to the seniors, tell them how much you love them, how much you believe in them, the strengths you see in them. And then they're going to go out and just dominate. They're going to go out and live that out. And so every senior, I gathered them. It's Friday. We're going to play some Mammoth. She was pretty good back then. And I said, all right, guys, got something special today. And I had seniors, I had an envelope with their name on it, packed full of letters. It said, you guys have the next 20 minutes, go in the side gym there. I'm going to close the door. You're going to read the letters. And I'm thinking, man, they're going to come out of there ready to go play and kick butt. Well, they come out, Mike, I open the door. I'm like, okay, it's time. Open the door. Thank you, coach.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, they are an
yeah.
emotional mess, and we lose the game. And I'm like, okay, great idea, really bad timing, right? So now what we do is we do it the Thursday before we play. So Thursday after practice, you get your senior letters. That's been a super cool tradition.
That's good stuff.
It's still emotional. So,
do you know gentleman John Eagle? Does that name sound familiar?
Oh yeah,
he was a longtime campus coach. Yeah, I had him on, and we were talking about the exact same subject. And the one thing that I liked was kind of the same concept, but you had a plain white tee. You took it home, and your family, yourself, or I can't remember if he just gave it to the parents, and the parents would write exactly kind of like the letter concept, adjectives, things they're proud about you. I love you. And that was their undershirt. And they had the opportunity to wear that for their undershirt for the games. And I thought that was really powerful and special.
Yeah. Yeah. So did everybody do that?
Yes. From what I understand, I don't know how often he did it, but that is one of the things that he did in the past.
I'll tell you what, if John Eagle's doing it, it's probably good stuff. So a lot of respect to that guy.
He's great. He was a great coach and great guy to have on, and he had a lot of good insights and kind of just funny little insights that just kind of popped out of, like, one of them was he went into work. He had his older daughter with him, and to keep the daughter distracted, he gave the daughter a puzzle, and she put the puzzle together in like 2 minutes and be like, yeah, can we go now? I finished the puzzle. And then that was like it clicked with him. It was a puzzle of the Seattle Seahawks team, and like the metaphor was, you put the person together, you put the team together type thing. And that was something that just was communicated to him by his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And just happened in the most random instances, and it was powerful and something that stuck with him. So
yeah,
why is football the greatest sport in your opinion?
I would say, some parent, you're a parent, it's like we want our kids to develop grit and toughness and love and all these things. But I think sometimes as a parent, like, I wanted it to happen without any risk, as long as it's careful and safe, sure. I think part of what makes football special is that there is risk involved. It's real. If I don't do my job or you don't do your job, people's well-being is at stake. So I think the element of risk is part of what makes football real. Like, you could talk in baseball, man, we got to sacrifice for each other or whatever. It's like, yeah, kind of, and I was a baseball guy, but football is real in that sense. And I think that's part of the appeal of it, is that there is risk involved. And so me being at my best affects Keanu's well-being. What I do and don't do has direct impact on your life. And I would say, like, as an adult, that as a dad, right? If you're going to go sit at the tavern and after work and not get home and not, your kids don't get, like, you're not following through on your responsibilities, and people are impacted by what you do and by what you don't do. And so I love the realness of that. I love the fact that we have to work together. I love the fact that it's hard, it's a grind and it's a struggle. Mark Speckman, who was the Willamette head coach for years, is one of my huge mentors in my life, and we're very close friends. But I can remember we went to football camp down at Willamette. We took Liberty down there, and he gave a talk, and he said, football camp, there's two kinds of fun. There's Disneyland fun, where you're on the ride, you're just going crazy, and you're having a great time. That's great. And then there's build your house kind of fun. And build your house kind of fun is, you work all day, you got blisters on your hands, you're sweaty and dirty, you're exhausted. But you look at the people next to you at the end of it and you go, that was fun, man. We did something. We accomplished something. Football is definitely build your house kind of fun. We always try to blend in some Disneyland fun in there as well. But that idea of build your house kind of fun, like it is fun to work hard and create something and to do it together. So that's also part of what I think makes football really special and important.
I like that. I'm definitely gonna take that one. Build your house phone. I'm taking that one. Let's get stuff there, coach. If I were to come and watch your practice, what would you want myself or another coach? What would you want us to take away from just the identity of your team just from watching your practice?
I think, that it would be player led. I heard the phrase recently, that you want a player led, not coach fed, that the kids are generating the energy. We've prepped them to do that, right? We've handed over the reins and said, you got to bring that, that they would do that. You'd see great effort. You'd hear voices of encouragement. You'd hear voices of challenge. That you'd see great body language, and that there wouldn't be a lot of standing around. Another Mark Speckman line is where he said, a bad rep is better than a good stand. Like kids would be
That's good.
getting,
Yeah.
like you don't get better by watching. No,
Where
kid,
is he
please.
now? Is he down in? Was he at
He
Cal Poly or somewhere in one of the FCS
He
schools,
is
Big
gonna
Sky schools?
he's gonna be the offense coordinator at Azusa Pacific.
Nice.
Azusa Pacific
They
has
brought it back for
resurrected.
D3, right?
Yeah, they've resurrected their program, and so Mark, in fact, you should get him on here. He'd
Yeah.
love to do this. So if you want that, let me know. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure he'd
I
love
would.
to
I
do it.
would. I would love that. We'll love that contact.
So he was he was at Willamette, and then he went to Menlo for a year, and then he went to one of his coaching friends, Dan Hawkins. Dan had been the Willamette head coach, Boise State head coach, Colorado head coach. He got the job at Montreal in the Canadian Football League, and he hired Mark. So Mark went up there for 2 years, and then when he came back from there, he went to Lawrence University out in Wisconsin, and then after Lawrence, oh my gosh, now I'm kind of forgetting his journey. But he ended up at Clarion University in Pennsylvania, this school there, and he was there for 3 years. And then AJ Parnell, who was a coach in our area at a high school, he got the job at Azusa Pacific, and he asked me. He said, "Do you think Speck would be interested?" And I'm like, "I guarantee he'd entertain it. So give him a call."
That's
So
so
he's going
good
to be at
for
Azusa
California
Pacific.
football. Yeah.
Yep. He had 2 opportunities. There was one at another school, a former player was like, "Man, I'd like to have you come coach me," and AJ at the Azusa Pacific. And I'm like, "Man, you are the most sought after 70-year-old football coach in America."
That's funny. Well, I mean, not a lot of people realize some of the people that came out of Azusa Pacific, and I only know 2 of them: Spencer Danielson and is it Adam Canales or David Canales, the Panthers head
Dave
coach?
Canales, yeah.
Dave Canales. They're both Azusa Pacific guys.
Christian Okoye, too, if you know that name.
Okay. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then a gold medal decathlon winner, his name, Brian Clay. He won the 2008 gold medal in the decathlon. He's a Pacific guy.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, isn't Brian Clay from? Could be wrong. Hawaii. That
He
might be.
is.
Okay,
Yes,
that's what I
sir.
thought. That's
His
what I
son
thought.
played for us, so we got to know him a little bit.
At Liberty.
At Liberty.
Okay,
At Liberty.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. Is there a drill or team period that you guys currently do that you wish you did, 15, 20 years ago?
I think one of the things that we've done from from a defensive perspective, my defensive coordinator, like our scout team, like it's reps. There's a pressure to get plays off and, get as many looks as we possibly can and run to the football. So I think just, really being efficient in getting repetitions from a defensive perspective. And then offensively, we went several years ago now to where a day of the week, there is an emphasis day. Like, Monday could be our perimeter run and play action pass day. And that's what we're doing that day. Tuesday, it's going to be our short and long traps and our concept pass day. Wednesday. So we have, instead of just randomly running plays, like, that you're going to be focused on, like if we're running our traps on Tuesday, short traps, long traps, like you, as an offensive line coach, what drills you want to be working. And we're going to be, it's the, pin and pull, it's, filling its, tackles, inside releasing the linebackers. It's, I think by having days matched to plays, it helps your coaches, your positional coaches, know what drills they want to work on. So that'd be something that I don't know why I didn't do it, but I just didn't do it for a long time.
What do you coach? What's your passion on the football field from a positional standpoint?
So I was the defense coordinator for several years up until 2008, and then was the offensive coordinator from 2013 to probably 2020. So, and I don't coordinate right now, but my focus is more offense. And I coach quarterbacks and I coach DBs, but I've coached D tackles. I love coaching D tackles, linebackers. So, kind of from a leadership perspective, one of the you were asking about, like, you know, how has your philosophy evolved and things like that. One of the things that I've learned, and it's from a book that I read, a guy named Craig Groeschel writes a lot about leadership. And one of the things that he says is that great leaders have to be great delegators. And your job as a coach, your job as the leader is to do the job that only you can do, right? And too often as leaders, we get caught. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, you're wasting energy on something that really you need to be focused in this area, right? This is the job that only the head coach can do. And so I kind of listed, like, what are some of the things that I'm doing right now that really aren't the main focus of being the head coach of your program. And one of them was the offense coordinator. And so, and Groeschel, he says that if you have someone in your organization who can do a job 60, 70% as well as you can with momentum, and you need to delegate it. And so a huge thing for me was, what you do, because what ends up happening is you're the ceiling to your organization, to your team, because you won't delegate. And so that's been a huge thing for me, is learning how to delegate. And I mean, if there's, I don't take a lot of, I'm not trying to be overly humble. I'm like, I feel like, what have I done well? I've hired really good guys that work hard. And I mean, that's why they've been with me for 28 years and 23 years and 14 years. And, because they have ownership of the program and they know that their voice matters. And I don't have a big staff either. I don't know how guys manage those big staffs. So
That's good stuff, Coach. Gave you a heads up beforehand. My daughter has a question for the guest of the day. And her question was, what is your favorite breakfast?
Well, I appreciate that question, and I'm gonna say French toast. You do some good French toast, that's gonna hit the spot for me.
Yeah. What does the word team mean to you?
I think it's how you do life. I think if you're gonna be successful at all the things that matter in life, you got to declare war on isolation. Like, we succeed in community. So, one of the words that one of my mentors brought to our team in 2008 is this word Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is a Zulu word. It means I am because we are. Your success is my success. Your failure is my failure. Our humanity is inextricably linked together. What happens to you happens to me. And so I am, as a Jesus follower, we're not designed for isolation. We're designed to live in community. And so team that's where life is. So
That's
it
a
means
great
everything.
That's a great answer, Coach. How do you go about, addressing a player who's, not meeting expectations or not meeting team standards?
This gets back to just all my evolution as a coach. Those are those crucial conversations, right? Where you're addressing a kid, or it could be a coach, and in a crucial conversation, we're usually, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but this is where it takes me. Crucial conversations are where our blood, we start getting fight or flight. So there's less blood in our brain, because we kind of, and I was taught that when you're going to go into a crucial conversation, what do I want for myself? What do I want for the other person? And what do I want for our relationship? And so, I think always with a kid, if he's not meeting expectation, is to be very honest with them. But sometimes I think we disguise something as honesty, but it's, there's two things. There's truth, and then there's grace. And I think a good message has both of those, truth and grace. I had a challenging conversation with a player just recently, who wanted to return to our team after taking a year off. And what I did is I invited a teammate into the conversation. And so it wasn't just me talking with this player. I also wanted this player to get feedback from a peer on how he was perceived, because I think coming from a coach obviously matters, but I think, coming from one of your peers, and man, talk about a tough thing for a kid to give honest feedback that's critical, like, that's tough. But if we don't do that, we don't really care about people, right? We're more concerned about not hurting their feelings. And So I think it's done with truth and grace.
Can you kind of reflect on maybe a moment where, you had an opportunity for that crucial conversation and you wish you may have handled it differently, or maybe there was an adverse moment throughout the season and throughout your career where, you wish you would have zigged and you ended up zagging, and kind of how that's kind of reflected on or helped your philosophy for the better?
So times where I messed it up, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a way better way to put it right there. Way easier.
Well, I can remember this, I think one of the things my dad modeled this, like when you screw up and you're wrong, weakness is not admitting it, strength is admitting it. And I remember it was 2008. We had this coverage where if they got into a 3-by-1 set and we called this coverage, our corner on the short side was going to blitz off the edge. And as you blitz, you want to pick, you got to be aware of the screen too, because they ran a tailback screen out of this. Well, he blitzes, doesn't pay attention to the tailback. They throw the screen. He doesn't, and his name was Malcolm. And I got him over there and I, on the sidelines, I'm like, if you would pull your head out of here, you'd have a pick right there. And I just screamed at him. And I could, it was, early in the game. And I'm like, that was so wrong. I lost it because I had the perfect play design and the perfect call and the perfect situation, and he screwed it up. But that's not our standard, right? That's not treating somebody with dignity and respect. So that Monday, I found him in the hallways and I said, hey, I want to talk to you. He goes, yeah, what's up? And we won the game. I said, hey, I need to apologize for what happened and what I said to you. Coach, it's not a big deal. I'm like, it is a big deal. That's not treating you with dignity and respect, and it's not okay. I apologize. Will you forgive me for that? Yeah, coach, I get you. And this goes back to another kind of coaching thing. We Zoom for our Sunday meetings as a coaching staff. We don't meet in person anymore. A lot of guys are like you. They have little ones. And, we're not going to go waste time at school driving there and everything. So I have my itinerary. And my itinerary for our Sunday coaches meeting is, number one, how did our junior football teams do? And I get a little update, tell them how, all the teams did. Then number two is how do our guys that are playing in college do? And then my third thing is how was our communication throughout the week, Friday night, etc. How was it, coach to coach? How was it? Because sometimes on a Friday night, the fur is flying and guys get in, we're competitive and we've known each other forever. And sometimes we got to do a little damage control, like, we blew up at each other. Or it may be, hey, coach, maybe it's for me. It's like, you didn't communicate what you wanted on Tuesday at practice very well at all. We didn't know what you wanted, Steve. So we'll say, how was communication coach to coach Friday night throughout the week? And there's been times where a coach and I have banged heads and we talk about it. And I might say, hey, I felt you were being disrespectful to me as a head coach in that situation. You were yelling at me on the sidelines. I'm not okay with that. Or a coach might say, hey, so it's really this honest time of like, talk about the elephant in the room. And so coach to coach communication, coach to player, like the one that I screwed up with Malcolm, it really came out of that, and then coach to official, the official, we don't have a game if we don't have the officials. How was our communication with them? And so that, because it's so easy to avoid conflict. And I feel like when we do that communication thing, and if you want to talk about relationship like you and your wife, me and my wife, great relationships have great communication. And so that's the first thing we're going to talk about. How was it? Because if we can get better at that, we're going to get better at everything. So
that's good stuff, Coach. Tell us a little bit about your leadership process, your guys' captain process.
Yeah. Well, we just went through this. So in the off season, we always do, we have a leadership council. And we've done it a couple different ways, but we'll have kids, we as a coaching staff kind of talk about who are those guys that should be on our leadership council, rising sophomores, rising juniors, rising seniors. And we try to get representation from each class. And then we'll invite those kids to be a part of our leadership council, which we'll meet on Wednesday mornings. And this year we probably had like 4 meetings, but we've done up to 10 meetings. And for the leadership, it's, if you're going to be on this, you got to be committed, right? So it's kind of like, we say kind of one strike and you're out. But things happen. Sometimes there's stuff that arises or there's a conflict where the kid has, honor society. But at the leadership council, we've done a couple different things. One of them, we went through a team captain's handbook. A guy named Jeff Jansen has its leadership. He talks about leadership by example, and then being a vocal leader. And it's these chapters. We'll read through it. The last couple of years, 2 years ago, our defense coordinator, he did a leadership training in the offseason based on this Blue Angels video that's on Amazon Prime. And it's really, really good. And just, the Blue Angels, like they'll meet, they do a debrief after every exercise and a real honest conversation, how things went. And for them, the standard isn't like winning. The standard is at going 400 miles an hour, can we go from 18 inches wings apart to 12 inches? Like, so the standard is always, it's based on them, and we can always do it better, but really good stuff. And he did a great job developing that. So then what we'll do out of that leadership council, and this is something that we stole from Linden High School, those guys are kind of the lieutenants, right? If you're on leadership council. And then if you want to be a captain, you need to give a speech in front of the team. We just did this last Friday. You need to give a speech in front of the team, telling them why you want to be a captain. So we're right in the middle of spring ball, but we finished up, we practiced last week. And then on Friday, we did a ropes course up in Everett. We took 2 buses of kids up. It's a big ropes course, all this stuff. And then at the end of the day, we're up there for 4 hours. Those of you that want to be the captain, here's your opportunity to tell why. And so we had 6 kids get up, and then the process send out a Microsoft Office forums, and they rank them basically 1 to 6.
Yeah.
And
are you guys kind of picking the 6, or is it anyone that wants to stand up and speak? They can.
You have to be in leadership council.
Okay.
So you can't just get up there without training and some of that. So so that's the way we did it this year.
I like
and
it.
Last year.
Has it as the head coach kind of looking at that process? Are the team members, in your opinion, been pretty spot on as far as, okay, yeah, I think these guys, live up to what it is a captain is supposed to be about?
Yeah, I think yes. And we talk a lot of, like, how it is nowadays. People talk a lot and they don't back it up. You can kind of say whatever you want. And I think the process has been great. And I think it's, we really, there's a Winston Churchill quote. He said, it's the price of greatness is responsibility. And that's for these kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old. Leadership's a crucible, man. It's tough. It's not for the faint of heart. So, but we also want to, I tell them, just because you're not a captain doesn't mean you're not a leader. Right. So, we've had great leaders that didn't have the title of captain. So,
yeah. That's good stuff, Coach. You dropped a lot of books on me throughout here. I got Facing Your Giants. I got The Path. If you have to, give me your top 3 most impactful books for your mindset and who you are as a person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Bible.
Yep.
That's that. So I get 4. That's number 1. I would say that book, The Path, was really good for me. It's a book of exercises and writing and all that stuff, which, Craig Rochelle has some great books. One of them is called Winning the War in Your Mind. I'm a big time reader. So there's just a lot of them. And then those are a couple. Tony Evans wrote a book called Kingdom Man that I've always liked.
Kingdom Man.
A lot of them are, combination of faith and leadership.
Yeah. Did you play with Jim Shapiro, or was he after you?
I did not. He was after me.
Yeah.
But I watched him play. He was a really good player.
Well, he put me on the book, Chase the Lion. That was
Mark Batterson. Yeah.
That was a good book. And then that turned into Pilgrim's Progress. That turned into Crazy Love. That turned into Corrie ten Boom, Hiding Place. So it was a good, it was a good plethora of books there. Advice for younger coaches, kind of going through it, or young aspiring coaches.
It's so worth it. It's just so worth it. I look back and I'm going, so on a Friday night where I'm playing catch with my quarterback, I'm like, I am doing the same thing that I loved doing when I was 6 years old that I am at 60. And I've made a living doing this. I've never had, it's been hard, right? I mean, no doubt about it. It's been hard, but I think I never have to question. I think if you're a teacher and a coach, you never have to question whether or not what you're doing is making an impact. Like, if you're going to what you could, maybe you just don't want to do it anymore. But I've always felt like, and I think being a teacher and a coach, I started when I was 22, very about me. And I think the one of the beautiful things about teaching and coaching is you realize at a very young age that what I say and do and act is influencing these young people. And it made me into a better man. And it's just so cool too at the end of it. I just retired from teaching and, I mean, you see these movies, Mr. Holland's Opus or whatever, and the stadium is roaring. Like, wait, it wasn't like that, right? Really, when you get done and you retire, there's going to be, people are going to give you some cards and there's going to be some conversations and hugs. But like put all of you into it, right? I mean, if you completely put all of you into it, I just have felt like the relationships, the connections, it wasn't about winning. It's about the relationships and connections that happened as we pursued this thing together. So stay with it and find mentors. That's the other thing. You're never too old to not have a mentor. I mean, I want to be surrounded by men of wisdom and guys that I can go to. So that's been huge for me too.
The year is 2045. Coach Steve Valach just decided that this was his last year coaching in 2045.
2045?
2045. You're at your senior banquet. Then you get up there to give your last speech addressing the team. What is your parting wisdom?
It would go back to that community piece, and there's a lot of ways to say it. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. I gave you that definition of Ubuntu, declaring war on isolation. Like, you got to lock arms with people, right? And because sometimes you're carrying them and sometimes they're carrying you. But if you try to go at it alone, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. And the other thing is that I think real men who are strong can share their weaknesses, right? Like you find those trusted people in your life, but I don't get over the illusion that you got to be perfect and you can't have weaknesses. Like, we all have them, right? And the way that we overcome our weaknesses is by locking arms with each other and taking care of each other. So it would have to do with that for sure.
That's good stuff, Coach, man. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for the conversation. I'll turn this thing around and I'll release it either Friday or Saturday this week, and I'll give you a heads up on when that's going to be. But I appreciate you, Coach. That was a good combo.